Statutory duty of law means it's by an act of Parliament, and it sets a set of standards, a group of regulations, whatever it may be, that everybody has to respond to. So it brings consistency in law. So what we are after is that statutory duty of law. There are too many gaps in university policies that students can fall through.
The problem is most students are 18. So you're an adult, you're treated as an adult. So different universities have different policies on when they would tell a family if someone isn't well. So it's up to the wellbeing team within the university to decide what their processes are. But for me, each case should be treated completely differently, because there's always different pressures and different problems for each person. It's not just a tick box kind of thing.
So what we are asking for is something that sets actually a relatively low bar for a standard of support for students that is consistent across, there are over 200 higher education institutions in the country. So we want that consistency. We want clarity. So for me as a lecturer, I know where my pastoral role begins and ends. I know my professional colleagues in welfare and well-being, what their role is, where that begins and ends. Each of us knows what our duty to students is. We know where the pastoral handover goes from us to the clinical supports that we can't give. That is the role of the NHS. We want students to have that same clarity.
This petition is to fill a gap. I mean, almost wherever you go, you will have legal duties of care owed to you. For example, if you go to a restaurant, you'll find that people ask you, have you got any allergies when you give your order? And that's because they've got a legal duty of care to make sure that you're safe, and that they know of any particular vulnerabilities that you have. When you're at school, there's the education authority has a legal duty of care to look after its pupils. Same with employers, but there is this lacuna, just a big gap with universities. The duty of care would mean that the universities have to step up and train their academics, and also probably refocus their priorities.
The government up until now has said that universities do have a duty of care to students, but the practice of it is voluntary. So there is no legal standing for this. So there is nothing actually in common law that quite fits. And universities can choose whether or not to support effective mental health support. We want the law to have teeth if they don't.
The main point is there has to be something mandatory, because universities just duck and dive unless there's something mandatory, and they all perform completely differently. There's a huge variation across the sector. So there's got to be something mandatory. That mandatory thing is fairly simple. It's just they have to take reasonable steps to prevent reasonably foreseeable harm. So that's not a big ask. It's absolutely consistent with what employers do already. And actually, it's consistent with what many of us thought already existed within the sector, even a lot of universities and university lawyers. Students should not be left in this really precarious situation of not knowing whether they can rely on their university or not. And although the duty of care can be one simple line, behind that line, in order to comply with it, you need to have a whole approach that covers training, prevention, intervention, and then, I guess, circumspection afterwards, after the event, keeping an audit, keeping a record of how many deaths by suicide you've had, and learning from that, doing a proper serious incident analysis and review of it. June the 5th is just the very first step of a long and drawn out process, but at least you still have to pass that hurdle. So fingers crossed that goes well, and then we'll see what happens.